We begin with the beginning.
Beginning. Good.
The
All
beginning
right.
of creation itself. Actually, yesterday I had a very interesting discussion with a young girl who just got married, who has come from US, and she was interested in Advaita philosophy. So she has been reading and listening to Advaita philosophy, but at the end of it, she was asking, it's all philosophy is fine, but how does it connect with everyday life? And I thought that's a good basis to talk about the different ways or different aspects in which this truth has practical ramifications. So essentially, there are two ways of looking at oneself and the world around us, and even God for that matter. One is a dualistic way that everything is separate, and it can go to an extreme form where each one is separate entity, and within us the body is separate, the mind is separate, the life force is separate, emotions are separate, the spirit is separate, and they have nothing to do with each other, but they are like uncomfortable partners dwelling in the same house. That's how much of medicine advanced, and I think that was necessary at some point so that attention could be focused on each part. That's the extreme reductionist model. And now that everybody is talking about Advaita, the term used is non-dual consciousness. What is interesting is that without using either non-dual consciousness or Advaita, people are actually going towards the same truth, that there is essentially oneness. So it's a knowledge which is based on oneness. Now, the moment we speak about oneness, not going into the philosophical aspects and the deep and profound spiritual truths that emerge from it, but essentially it means that all these separate seemings are at a most practical level, not just in a deep theoretical sense, are interconnected. They are interwoven with each other. And we need to find the thread which reconnects us with the world around, reconnects us with the divinity that is within and beyond, reconnects us with each other. Easy to understand when we talk about, social psychology, that we have to find that connecting thread. And obviously that connecting thread cannot be in terms of mere association, adjustment, accommodation, but a deeper thread that runs through humanity, forming its warp and woof. And this thought is coming up. This is one kind of a new sociology which is emerging, and it's emerging through a back door of situations and circumstances. So there is a problem, in Paris yesterday,
Yes.
and everybody in the world reacts to it. Humanity becomes suddenly as if we realize that we are woven in one single cord. Otherwise, one response could be, what has this got to do with me? My life is unaffected. But it's not happening. It's spontaneously people are responding. And today the latest statement that some of the people spoke were very interesting. So one of them said that, we have to understand that terror is a common enemy. It's not about one country, another country. And then, there are common goals, there are common aspirations. So it's coming through the back door. Similarly, in economics, we speak about now, that, there was very interesting discussion yesterday. This girl was an economist. And, the discussion came on, if there is only one, why there are a number of souls? It's a common question. And we spoke about it, that this one is infinite. And as he pours himself more and more into finite forms, a time comes, because many forms are not really able to absorb, retain, and expand as a result of this infinite consciousness. But because it's pouring, ultimately as a result of all this, one particular name and form, is able to respond adequately and becomes one with the infinite consciousness. But the beauty now is that if change takes place in one, automatically many are uplifted in the process. Sri Aurobindo's famous line, one soul's ambition lifted up the race. And we see in the life of Sri Aurobindo and others that how just because one body is able to hold the infinite consciousness, many get influenced So essentially, why does that happen? That happens because infinity is pouring into many, 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 and they're interconnected.
Is therefore existentialism and nihilism and Freudianism gone?
Gone, gone. They had their day, but it's gone. So this is a very beautiful way to look at it's coming. As I said, then the moment we discuss that, this girl says, now I understand. We talk about it in economics. That if there is a development in the developmental model, if there is a development at one level, it percolates and helps everybody. I said yes. So that's the way. That's the new kind of thought which is coming everywhere. Now, in the field of psychology, to start with, it means that the way we used to study body and mind and everything is separate, that day is gone. And the interconnectedness of mind and body has come. That's come in a big way already. It's last, I think, 30, 40 years, it's come in a big way. Though still, unfortunately, because of the strong grip of physical mind, we still treat our bodies as if they are dead bodies. Now, it means, what I mean by dead bodies, it's just a machine. So this machine has to be fitted by something outside it. Now, machines can't repair themselves. Maybe some machines do, I don't know. Maybe computers have this mechanism, but most machines cannot repair themselves. Somebody else has to repair it and fix it. But our bodies are not like a machine. They are living organisms, and so they have a capacity to work through from within. And the body doesn't recognize things as diseases and particularly names. It recognizes things as states of consciousness. And there are shadowy states, there are luminous states, and innately it strives to readjust the balance. It recognizes disharmony very fast. That's how the body recognizes that there is a want of balance. And it gives many feelers to us that there is a want of balance. Some part will begin to get stressed out of pain, and therefore our attention is drawn to that part. So it's one kind of a want of balance. It manifests symptoms. There are various ways by which the body says. Now this balance is to be recreated. The interesting part is this balance is being reflected in the body as an end organ, as we say. It's more like a barometer which is telling us about the pressure. But the want of balance is taking place at some other level. There is lack of harmony. And it goes to this extent, there is a whole science, and Mother and Sri Aurobindo speak about it, and you would be knowing that, photographs were sent to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo earlier days before accepting the people.
Oh, yes.
And they would sometimes make interesting comments that, the forehead indicates this, but the lower part indicates this. And Sri Ramakrishna used to do this as a means to assess. So the inner consciousness reflects even in the way the body is made. It goes to that extent. And therefore this want of balance one can discover, needs to discover and correct it inside. And if that correction takes place slowly, it will begin to percolate onto the physical level and things will disappear. Now this is a new kind of thought which is coming up in,
Yes, about the role of science and the string theory.
Yes.
Seems to be that unified
Absolutely.
field.
Yes, and Einstein himself was looking for even in the field of physics,
Yes.
that there is a whole continuity. And at least this much we know, that we can look at things as separate particles, or we can look at them as waves which are continuous.
But when Dr. Dalal and I spoke some time back, he said in psychology there was never any mention of the soul.
Yes.
Is it still?
Well, I'm not
You were
sure
saying
that.
consciousness,
Not consciousness, of course, is a very general term,
Yes.
but men like Joseph Campbell, who did
Oh, yes.
start off from Freudian psychiatry, but he came to India,
Yeah.
and he spoke about the sacred space. And I think it's not necessary to use a term. You see, one big problem that we have in human communication is that our clarity of definitions becomes a big hurdle in communication.
Yes, yes.
Now, I would want to hear the word soul. The other day, someone came with a phrase from the Gita It's a very interesting phrase, and Shri Krishna says in the Gita, Atmev Atmano Bandhu Atmanev Ripuratmana. Literally, it means that the self is the enemy of the self and the self is the friend of the self. But the word used is Atma. So he says, how can Atma be an enemy? So, the sense that Krishna has put there, Atma, is the sense of the self, which, as a psychologist, we can understand that we all have a sense of the self. And usually it comes from the mind. He's not talking about the soul here. But if one becomes, caught up in words. So I think in modern psychology, also there is a tendency to you speak of for instance when people spoke of factor X, or they speak about the they use the word spiritual very loosely, but there is something which is not yet fully recognizable. Of course they don't use elaborate descriptions, or they have not really explored it in the depths as a yogi does, so it's understandable. But I won't say that it's not recognized except in very hardcore schools. They do exist, and unfortunately, a lot of mainstream academia is still hardcore school, and they don't, because it's. I think it's because it'll make them step out of their comfort zones. See, one good thing about Freudian theory, the good part of it, is that it gives me a justification for many tendencies. So I suppose it's a great comfort zone. Man is an animal, so there are things and issues, and it spares us the effort of ascension, of finding something greater and beautiful. So many people would like to believe this theory. So, but the fact is that there is a whole range of experience which doesn't fit into the existing paradigms of psychology, and there are people who are talking about it, yes, in mainstream, or rather the hardcore mainstream. In religion you have hardcore elements and soft ones which turn religion towards spirit.
Yes.
In every religion there are hardcore elements who will who are sticking to the outer body, and there are those who are who use religion very with a plasticity and subtlety, and through religion they ascend towards the higher realms. So also in ideas, in the realm of ideas, there are very rigid ideologues who are worse than religion, so they are close to everything. But then there are many who understand that there are softer elements, subtler elements, and there are spaces, experiences which we cannot connect with in the traditional way, and they are opening to this idea of soul. But even if we don't speak of that explicitly, then the one word which, as you rightly say, comes very handy is consciousness. That's the term, I think, which is going to be the bridge between science and spirituality, if we may use the word. And the mother spoke about the third point where science and spirituality would meet, and consciousness would be the bridge, because it is a word with many, many possibilities.
There's a film, you may have seen it, Out of Africa, with Meryl Streep.
Yes.
And at one point she says to this boy, I cannot keep you as a houseboy if your leg is so infected. And the boy says, I will talk to this leg.
Wow, wonderful. Wonderful, yeah. Yeah, that's something very interesting, to talk to the body.
Yes.
That's something we don't do. We let the doctor do the talking, and doctors, are already, they are poor healers. And there's a difference between a healer and a doctor. A doctor is somebody with a degree, and he has whole books stored in the brain, and sometimes I visualize them as having a lot of cobwebs all around, the whole head is swollen with partly with pride. I can say this, I am a doctor myself, trained in this. And a lot of formations, they don't realize it. So, they look at everything as they have to categorize and classify. It's an extreme degree of mental development which leads to over specialization. The very process of specialization, and Sri Aurobindo points out the dangers of specialization, both in the field of yoga and in every field. See what happened in yoga. People went into specialization, over specialization, then techniques and even a whole technology.
Yes.
So if you do this, then you are doing correct yogic exercise, this is the correct way of meditation, this is the correct way. But what does mother say? She makes it so simple. Any exercise done with a yogic attitude is Hatha yoga. I mean, simple thing like climbing and the stairs up and down.
Yeah.
So this element of consciousness begins to, take a back seat as we focus more and more on the externalities, on the intricate details of anything. Now, these have their point. It's not that they don't have a point, but if we, completely deal with things as separate and in isolation, then we miss the point. But if we do it against a backdrop of a larger unity of, unity of the soul within, unity of man with the cosmos, unity of man with the creator.
But in matters of health, often the mind comes in and creates havoc.
Absolutely true. And one simple thing that mother used to say, and Sri Aurobindo also, that it gives a great vantage point if we learn to detach the mind from the illness. Now, illness is in its own place, and other things are in their own place. It's not easy because naturally, if one has a fever or a headache, the mind tends to get drawn. And then it not only gets drawn, the physical mind begins to, every headache has to be a brain tumor, and every fever a dengue or stuff like that. And there are always neighbors, good-willed neighbors, but ignorant goodwill who, put fear. So it's very important to practice, even in normal life, a certain degree of detachment. And one simple thing which helps it is, simply to be regular, punctual, to do one's work diligently, regardless of whatever. Then the body learns to obey the mind. But not mind in terms of the fancies, but there is a certain degree of mastery over the body. So we have these two kinds of people, and mother used to really, and I have seen here, people who are regular, simply regular in their work. They go on time, they do their work regularly. You'll see a number of them in the dining room. Amazingly, the incidence of illness, actually somebody should do this kind of a research here. The incidence of illness is much lower in them. And there are various reasons, but one reason is that, by the very fact that one is regular and punctual, it's a sign that there is a certain mastery over nature, because only when you have that mastery, because it involves everything from the previous night's food and sleep to everything else, otherwise you cannot function.
And the idea of work,
Yes.
Mother says, is the body's best prayer to the divine.
And she used to ask this question when people were ill. She would often ask, is he coming for work? Yes, mother, regularly. Then don't worry.
See that?
She used to say that because it opens the body, makes it so receptive to the higher energies. Otherwise, just when we meditate, we come in contact with some part. That is provided we really meditate and not just sit cross-legged and eyes blinded, but with a swell of thoughts. But then, it's an inner being which experiences. It can at the most put a stamp on the body, but the body has to also open up and become receptive to the higher energies. So work is a very important ingredient. And as I said, it's not the body, and more importantly, the vital, whose fancies, I don't feel like working, I don't feel like getting up today, let me rest, let me relax. Now, this is a dangerous tendency because the body is left to the whims and fancies of the vital. And the mind should step in there and teach and train the body, educate it. And if it does it, the body wonderfully responds, because in nature, it's by nature, as Sri Aurobindo says, it's a docile instrument. It is happy to work.
Yes.
It's born to serve. But unfortunately, it will serve even a bad master, and once it serves a bad master, it has a bad payoff. So, that's one part. Another thing which I have noticed is that body as an instrument is no doubt, very much misused and corrupted by many movements, particularly strong desires. They irritate, they create an imbalance, because desires mean one part is getting too much prominence compared to the rest. For instance, desire for food, strong hunger and greed. So it will stimulate one area of the body, but it's at the expense of other parts. Similarly, excess of sexual desire. Again, it stimulates one area of the body, uh, or strong ambition. So it's very important to see that is there an imbalance. Now, in a normal human life, desires are there. Everybody is not a yogi, but at least a moderation is a very important, simple way. What is called in India as sattvic life. So if desires can be brought under a reasonable regulation even of the mind, it will go a long way in keeping ourselves healthy. Just what is called as Sanyamit, life, Sanyama, that's the word used, where you exercise a control where everything is in balance. Means there is a place for everything. There is a place to enjoy food, there is a place for human relationships, there is place for everything in life, place for games, place for, reading, place for just entertainment, but it should be done in a balanced way.
I remember about the mind dwelling on things that the children used to go to Dr. Nripendra, and with all their ills and all that, and he would listen very quietly to them, and then he would say, "You want the blue pill or the red?"
Well, exactly. I have grown
And
up
they
that
were
way.
better.
I have grown up that way. I had so many experiences as a child. It was a village, so the only doctor was an RMP, which is called a registered medical practitioner, and they were not exactly MBBS doctors.
Okay.
And he would talk so nicely, and I always felt I'm going to an uncle. And then he would listen, and then ultimately he will give a powder, and there were 3 color mixtures. One was green and one was pink. These two I remember. Probably other mixtures, and they were so nice to start with, tasty, and you get well. So the fear factor was missing, and doctors didn't know about also about many diseases, which today we diseases are multiplied with hospitals and doctors. But otherwise it was so nice. You had a fever and it was okay, it'll be fine, and only if it lasted for 20 days one thought about typhoid or more sinister things.
Oh,
otherwise people were fine.
interesting.
I remember having as a child renal colic and blood in urine and everything, but I said no, I am not going to drink water till I offer my flowers to Saraswati, as out of just prayer. It was Saraswati Puja day. And the doctor said, no, you have to drink lot of water and Baralgan injection, this, that. I said, I am going to take nothing till I offer. So they preponed the whole timings of the puja simply because they had to accommodate a child's obstinacy. The strange part was that everything vanished, and eventually I was sent to Calcutta for detailed test after a few days, and then everything had cleared off, and this was as a child, and for decades now. So there are definitely influence of higher energies, and we need to recognize that. And the other part which we need to recognize is this interconnectedness of life. The thoughts of those around us, ill will, goodwill, all these things affect, our hopes affect others. And that's why certain places, certain friends can be so risky. Going to marketplaces, very often people say, one catches flu because of that. No, it's not just that. Because the market is full of all kinds of vibrations which affect.
And that's the term, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the vibrations.
Yeah. Nalnida was so sensitive that if he says once I tried to go to the Pondicherry market and he felt his whole body is melting. So he came back. Now, that's because of the interconnectedness. And when you become aware, and with growth in yoga, one has to become even more conscious, because you suddenly open up to, other dimensions, you open up to other forces, and much more easily, because the ego sense begins to thin out. And so one has to make a commensurate inner progress to take care of that. Actually, at one level, isolation or separativeness is also protects, as they say, ignorance is bliss, because it protects us. Again, it's a hard shell. But then growth means we have to discover the interconnectedness. So it's a paradox.
It's a paradox.
Yeah, and one has to go through it.
I have a friend who will not touch anyone. He will do namaste to everyone, but he won't touch. On the other hand, I know people who touch everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm aware that there are people who
They can embrace
yeah,
everyone.
yeah. With me, like I'm much more freer because I have discovered that, well, everything can be transmuted, everything can be offered, but there are some who tend to become more and more, isolated. Personally, I feel that may not be the ideal remedy. It may be temporary at a certain stage.
Yes.
But if obviously humanity cannot develop along that line all through, it's like an impossibility. At a certain stage, when one is very sensitive, maybe it's required. But I think one has to surpass that, overpass that stage. So it's a whole new world of understanding in the field of health and play of forces deeper and higher, which is opening up, and a whole psychological understanding where we include not just psychology of thoughts and feelings, but inner states of consciousness. Now that is coming up, and I think a lot of work needs to be done there, where we categorize, conventional psychology we categorize as cognition, volition, affect as distinct elements. So cognition refers to thought, and affect refers to feelings, emotions, and volition. That means the will, impulses, etc. But what we need to do is to understand these things in terms of states of consciousness. So there are states of consciousness which get reflected in thoughts, feelings, and impulses. And if we catch that part, then things become much easier. People often ask that we all know that we should think positively, and this is the commonest advice given: think positive. So then the next step is how to think positive. That's where the problem is. Everybody knows we should think positive. But if fundamentally at the level of consciousness, the state of consciousness is small, narrow, turned towards, in a obscurity, full of fear, then you can't simply work at the thoughts level. So if you change the state of consciousness, then things change. And for a yogi can change a state of consciousness in other by changing it within himself. Mother used to do that, and she says that when people come to me and they are complaining and they are full of, they have quarrel, they are unhappy, and she says, what I do is I just shift a little needle within myself. So I have to read this 3-4 times to make sure that am I reading right. She doesn't say that that also she used to do. I shift the needle within myself just a little, and the person is fine.
How do the healers work who have this sensitivity of consciousness?
You have to be careful to start with. On one hand is an advantage, and this sensitivity also develops at the different levels at which we are sensitive. For instance, at one point, even now, long back, I experienced something of sensitivity in somebody who was, standing maybe 15 feet ahead of me. But my sensitivity was connected to throat. Even now, maybe because of the this Vishuddha chakra being more active in terms of talks and expression, basically. So even now, many times, if somebody has a throat problem, I know the difference between viral and bacterial simply by knowing the feel here. Of course, I don't tell anyone, but without seeing the throat, it's there. So initially, it used to be a big problem. Even now, this is a sensitive area. But then, what do you do next? The moment the person has gone, and if possible, right then and there, offer it to the divine and call that stillness from above. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed when a patient has left. He has left a bundle of, not a good bundle. It's okay. As healers, one has to take it, like everything. So I feel suddenly that, all that energy and vibrations around. So I just sit quietly. At that point, I'll just withhold any patient, maybe say a few minutes. And all that is to be done is that the little gesture of turning above and calling up peace, 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 light, grace. And one can actually experience that the whole thing is getting cleared and cleared inside. And then you are back to that. And then you can take the next patient. And sometimes it's amazing that because of this sensitivity, one can become aware of an attack of illness upon oneself. This was with a patient, but even without a patient. And you are aware that it's going to come, and you start, calling that peace. And it gets blunted. I mean, something much more serious probably gets blunted. Several times, personally, I have tried it because I don't always prescribe this to patients because they may not accept it, because people come to a doctor usually for prescription. It's fine. But with me, I have seen in strange circumstances traveling in a train and having a high fever. And my first impulse was, okay, I'm carrying a paracetamol, let me take it because tomorrow morning I have to give a talk. And then I'm either too tired. This has actually happened 2 years back, and I'm too tired and I don't remember exactly where I have kept it. So then, the thought comes to me, this is how it actually happened. So let me put it very clearly that, well, even if I take water with the full faith that this is medicine, because every day I take tulsi leaves like that, this is my dose of vitamins and detox and everything. So I said, let me take water is something right there. So let me take it as medicine. So I held the water in my hands and prayed to Mother that let this develop all the healing properties. And I took it. And after that, I prayed to her. Now everything vanishes, by morning I am fit and fine. So this is several times, maybe, hundreds of times. Suddenly the heart will start beating very fast. And if I take that other route, that will get fixed into an illness. And all kinds of NGO, and surely they'll find some blocked arteries and stuff like that. But the other way is that, well, your body is throwing up something, pray, aspire, and till it has to work for Mother, let it continue. So that's how I look at it.
Wonderful. I have a personal story. In the early 70s, maybe late 60s, early 70s, I came down with amoebic dysentery. And the cure, flagyl, was worse than the disease.
Yeah, that's true. I agree.
So I write to Mother. I'm in the nursing home. Tracer, I think I was there. And I say, Mother, it's so bad. Must I take the medicine, or can I just pray to you and let happen what will happen? Mother writes back, pray to me and take the medicine.
Yes, that
because
works.
body was not ready
Yes,
yet. Consciousness was not ready
Yeah.
in the whole body yet.
Yeah, sometimes one has to do that, and it's perfectly fine. So one should not be basically rigid about anything. But one thing is for sure, whether one takes the medicine or not, the strength has to come from the grace. If that can come in, it's wonderful. One takes the medicine. If one has to see a doctor, one sees a doctor. It's fine. But basically, this trust in the grace, that ultimately the grace will heal me, and grace will do whatever is necessary, and the grace knows best, and the grace can do everything, then it's wonderful to hand over the body to the divine. So many things. And I have seen so many stories of people and authentic incidents, of even tuberculosis slowly getting well by constantly offering it. What was diagnosed as a tuberculosis. So, but the big problem is fear should not come in. The big difficulty is that when you are surrounded by all kinds of people who put fear into your head, and then you have also read something, and there are always incidents, there are always people who have died somewhere or the other. So one has to be free. Okay, fine. If one has to go, one has to go. What is there? I mean, one will do till this instrument is of use for her work. It's all right. And when this is, for some reason, she decides to dissolve the instrument, it's okay. New one is already, as Shubindu says, already purchased and ready, the new dress. So we don't have to worry. But I understand that it can be it cannot be done simply by imitating in the mind. It has to be an authentic state of consciousness. Then it works.
I did have a friend in the 60s, late 60s. She was a sadhaka, and her stomach swelled up terribly, and she said, I will take no medicine, I will just trust in Mother. I have complete faith in Mother that what has to be done will be done, no matter what. She began to die. They sent word to Mother, and Mother said, well, she'll die in 3 days if she doesn't go to Jipmer. She said, okay, I won't go to Jipmer. I'll die in 3 days, but I'll have her name on my lips.
Oh, wonderful.
See?
And yeah, that's
So
the right.
it didn't matter.
Didn't matter. We also have Nishikanto's story.
Exactly.
He was literally
Yes.
as he used to say, I am an encyclopedia of diseases in my body. Every part
Yes.
from, and of course, he was himself the cause for it and he knew it.
Yeah.
Such tremendous greed for food. And Sri Aurobindo had predicted it that if you come here, you will
Yes.
be prone to all kinds of illness because,
And if you go outside,
outside
you'll
you'll be a
become
world famous poet. And then he said, well, I am coming to the feet of Mahakali, how does it matter? And sure enough, at one point when he was on deathbed, the mother came to see him, he was on stretcher and
Yeah, they brought him to the meditation room.
meditation room and mother asked, what do you want? And he just pointed that keep your feet on my head, chest,
Keep your foot on my
foot on my chest.
on my chest.
And the mother said, she's very intelligent. And sure enough, he lived on for another 12 years, he recovered.
Yeah.
But so, it's I think in times to come, more and more, we will open to these higher truths. It's just a question of
Yes.
time because what else? See,
Yes.
the medical paradigm as it exists today, at least, is a very straight-jacketed thing. Human beings essentially are lovers of freedom. So if freedom at different levels, why not with the body? Why should it be at the mercy of so many doctors, medicines and instruments? It's not good. And I take it also like that, as you gave this instance of, somebody dying, that in such a process, it's not only dying with mother's name on the lips, that's wonderful for the person, but I think it works also collectively. One person leaves the body with the name of the mother on the lips, but because these cells automatically they spread out in the earth, it creates possibility of a future victory in others. So it's fine. It's like
Yes.
one has at least
Yes.
lived the way one should have lived, and if one goes, then other bodies, if not today, tomorrow, maybe 100 years down the line, will be receptive. So I think it has its own beauty and it is a kind of work. At least one has refused the slavery of the old.
In Mother's realization of the mind of the cells, she said those cells that were transformed in her by a vast contagion would go out to all who were ready.
Yes. That's a very interesting passage.
Yes.
And that's a passage where she is asking a question that she wants to know what happens to the cells. And then, at one point she even wanted to just go ahead, speed up with the transformation and leave aside whatever cells were not agreeing. And then she says, but what about them? They also want. So, of course, cellular consciousness is something which only mother could speak about because, she was aware of that. For us, even in general about the body consciousness or the physical consciousness, maybe consciousness of certain organs, if it can open to the light, to the peace which is above, but I guess for that we have to practice it when we are normal and healthy.
Yes.
Then it becomes easy, to every day maybe call some peace, take a bath, psychological bath, spiritual bath every day. So, as Vivekananda put it, that every day we must take a bath, both physically and spiritually, but if we can't take physically, at least we should take spiritual. So, I fancied he must have said that when he must be traveling all the way to the west, because in the ship or otherwise it may have been difficult. So, I think that's how it is. One has to keep on everyday practice this, that as Sri Aurobindo said, there is a whole ocean of light and peace above our head. And we have to practice calling it down and give ourselves to that, much more important. And open and offer ourselves. And slowly, once we get accustomed to the process, then it's easier to work it out.
Yes.
And I think as we succeed in ourselves, it gets translated into others.
So the vibrations, for example, in the Om choir,
Yeah, wonderful.
touch the world.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
collective prayer, collective
Absolutely.
peace.
And Mother has spoken about it. And what I think is beautiful about the Om choir, particularly since you mentioned, is that there is no fixed form or pattern. Because the moment you do it, you will reduce it to something which is, limited in the mental world. But if you allow it to grow and expand, that's why again, the other day we were speaking about Savitri, a mother's music for that matter. We should not try to categorize it in terms of, Western, Eastern, classical, this, that, because it's something which is come from the infinite. So we will find some notes which correspond to our understanding, but there would be notes which are beyond us, and that's what is something beautiful. Because then, it has a power to go beyond the realm of the mind and tap something which is beyond. I think Om choir is like that. There's one thing very good. Maybe very intuitively you have proceeded along that, because otherwise wherever we have Om chanting, in India we have several places and they formalize it a lot. So, some places so it's like first you say then you say oh,
Yes,
then you say
yes.
ma, and there has to be a certain way, everybody together. It's all right. It has its a kind of harmony, but a limited harmony. So one has to be, a lot more freedom of the infinite. Thank you so much. It's a joy.